The wind came first long, before the people, before the sound of boots or the creak of wagon wheels. It slid down from the mountains, slow and cold, carrying the smell of pine dust and old iron. The town of Red Hollow sat stiff beneath it, a cluster of weather-beaten buildings, clinging to the edge of the frontier as if one strong gust might peel it. From the earth, the church stood at the center, pale wood, scarred by years of sun and storm, its doors thrown open to welcome a wedding few believed would ever happen in this land. Hope was rare and happiness rarer still, and when either appeared it drew eyes sharp as knives. They gathered early ranchers in stiff coats, women clutching shawls, children hushed by rough hands. Faces carried expectation, not joy, curiosity, not kindness. Weddings in the Wild West were not gentle affairs. They were transactions, survival alliances stitched together by necessity. The guests took their seats on hard benches, whispering stories about the bride, some true, most cruel, all of them, waiting to see if the rumors were worth the dust on their boots. Far beyond the church, beyond the town, beyond the reach of gossip, a woman walked alone down a narrow trail. Her dress was simple, once white, now dulled by travel and hardship. The hem dragged against stone and dirt, and her feet were bare, red and swollen, each step a quiet act of endurance. She did not cry, she did not curse the road. She had learned long ago that the land did not care about suffering, it only demanded movement forward. Every step carried memory, the house she left behind, the promise that failed, the night that turned love into abandonment. She had been robbed of more than shoes, robbed of comfort, protection, and pride. Yet she kept walking because stopping meant surrender, and surrender in the Wild West was a kind of death. The mountains watched her approach, silent and ancient as judges who had seen worse and survived. Back in Red Hollow, another figure waited unseen by most, seated far to the back of the church, a mountain man, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a coat dark with age and weather. His beard was streaked with gray, his hands scarred and steady. He had come not out of invitation but instinct. Something had pulled him down from the high country, a restlessness that would not ease. He was a man known for silence and distance, a man people spoke about in lowered voices. When he entered a room, conversation always thinned like smoke in wind. He sat still, eyes forward, listening to the scrape of benches and murmured laughter. His gaze was not on the altar or the preacher, but on the open door, where sunlight cut a long pale blade across the floor. He had walked alone most of his life, choosing mountains over men, because stone never lied, snow never judged. He knew pain, the kind that settles deep and stays. He had buried more than he spoke about and learned. The words often failed where actions did not. The town clock struck the hour, and impatience crept in. Guests shifted, some laughed under their breath, assuming the bride had lost her nerve. Others wagered quietly on whether she would appear at all. The groom stood stiff near the altar, jaw tight, eyes darting to the door and away again. He wanted the ceremony done quickly before doubt could find him. Then the wind changed. The mountain man felt it first, a subtle shift, a cold breath curling through the doorway, carrying dust and something else, resolve. Maybe sorrow, maybe courage. The church fell quieter as a shape appeared against the light. A woman framed by the open door, standing still as if gathering strength before crossing a line she could never step back from. She took one step inside, then another. Her bare feet touched the wooden floor, and a murmur rippled through the room, low at first, then sharper. Someone snickered. A woman gasped, not in sympathy but disbelief. The bride walked forward, head high, shoulders straight, though every eye weighed her down. Her feet left faint marks on the floor, dust and blood mixing with each step, proof of the road she had conquered alone. Laughter followed her, light and cruel, bouncing off the walls like stray bullets. She heard it all and kept moving, because turning back would break her. She focused on the altar, on the promise of something better. Even if she no longer believed in promises, her hands trembled, but she folded them together, refusing to let the town see fear. The mountain man watched her feet, then her face, and something inside him shifted. He recognized the look in her eyes, the quiet determination born of loss. The room smelled of mockery and cheap cologne, and suddenly he could not stay seated. His hands curled into fists, memories stirring of a woman long ago, who had walked through snow barefoot because she had no choice and no one had stepped forward then. The bride reached the front and stopped. The laughter lingered a few heartbeats longer before fading into uneasy silence. Shame crept through the pews as people realized how far cruelty had gone. Yet no one spoke, no one moved. The preacher cleared his throat, unsure how to begin. That was when the mountain man rose, his boots hit the floor, heavy and final, every head turned, the sound cut through the room, sharper than a gunshot. He walked forward, slow, deliberate, each step carrying weight. Years of solitude followed him like a shadow. He said nothing, did not look at the groom or the guests, his focus was only on the woman who stood alone. The bride sensed him before she saw him, the air shifting again. She turned and their eyes met. For a moment the world narrowed to that space between them, recognition without history, understanding. Without words, the laughter was gone, replaced by something heavier, respect or fear, perhaps both. He stopped before her and knelt. The movement stunned the room. A man like him kneeling was unheard of. He removed his gloves, then reached out, not touching, yet asking permission with his eyes. She nodded, barely a breath of movement. He lifted her then, strong and careful, as if she weighed nothing, as if she mattered more than the room around them. Gasps filled the church. The mountain man turned, carrying her away from the altar, away from judgment, toward the open door and the waiting sky. Sunlight wrapped around them, dust dancing like sparks. The guests watched frozen as he walked out, leaving behind whispers that would never sound the same again. Outside, the wind softened as if in approval. The mountains stood witness. The bride rested against him, heart pounding, not from fear now, but from something else. Hope, perhaps, or the start of it. Her bare feet no longer touched the ground, and for the first time in a long while she allowed herself to believe that the road ahead might not be walked alone. The crowd inside the church did not follow them right away. The silence that fell was thick and awkward, like smoke trapped under a low ceiling. Men shifted their boots, women clutched shawls tighter, and no one quite knew where to place their eyes. The groom stood frozen near the altar, his face pale, as if something vital had been taken from him without warning. He opened his mouth once, then closed it again, because there were no words that could pull the moment back. Outside, the mountain man carried the bride down the steps of the church and into the open street. Red Hollow seemed smaller out here, exposed and unsure. The wind rolled along the main road, lifting dust and dry leaves, as if the town itself was uneasy. The woman in his arms breathed in the scent of pine and leather and something solid, something safe. Her hands curled against his coat, not out of fear now, but instinct. He stopped near the hitching post and slowly set her down. The ground felt different beneath her feet, no longer cold wood, meant for judgment, but packed earth warmed by sun. He looked at her for a long moment, his eyes steady, searching for pain and finding strength. Instead, he reached down and pulled off his boots, worn and cracked from years of hard ground. He placed them gently at her feet and stepped back without ceremony. The town watched from a distance. Some faces burned with shame, others with anger. A few showed something close to admiration, though none would admit it. Aloud, the woman stared at the boots, then up at the man. Her throat tightened, and for a moment words threatened to spill out, but she held them back. She had learned that gratitude sometimes lived best in silence. She slid her feet into the boots. They were too big, but strong and whole, and when she stood straighter it felt as if she had been given more than footwear. She had been given permission to keep going. The mountain man nodded once, as if a contract had been signed without ink. Behind them the church doors creaked open. The preacher stepped out, hands clasped uncertainly. He looked from the groom to the empty altar, to the pair standing in the street, and shook his head slowly. There would be no wedding today, not the kind written in ledgers anyway. The groom finally emerged, his jaw tight, his pride wounded deeper than he would ever admit. He took one step toward the bride, then stopped when he saw the mountain man turn halfway. His courage failed him right there on the dusty road. He muttered something lost to the wind and turned away, disappearing into the crowd. The town swallowed him whole, just another man choosing the easy path of silence. The bride watched him go and felt nothing. No anger, no regret, only a strange calm, as if a door had closed gently rather than slammed. She turned back to the mountain man and met his gaze. He spoke at last, his voice low, rough, like gravel rolled smooth by water. "There is a trail north past the cottonwoods," he said. "It leads out of Red Hollow and into higher ground." She nodded, not asking where it ended. Some questions did not need answers yet. They walked together through the town, not touching, but close enough to feel each other. Moved children stared, wide-eyed women whispered. Men pretended not to look. The pair passed the general store, the saloon, the blacksmith, all places that had shaped the town, yet none had shaped this moment. The streets seemed to stretch longer than before, as if giving them space to leave. At the edge of town the buildings thinned and the land opened. The mountains rose ahead, blue and steady. The trail, he spoke of, curved Between cottonwood trees, their leaves flashing silver in the light, the bride paused and looked back once at Red Hollow. The town looked ordinary again, small and forgettable. Already, the moment inside the church felt like a story that would grow larger with telling. She turned away and stepped onto the trail. The mountain man followed, matching her pace. Neither hurried. The wind softened as they moved away, and the sounds of the town faded until there was only the crunch of boots and earth and the distant call of a hawk. As they walked, memories pressed in on both sides. For her, the road brought back nights of cold and hunger, and the ache of walking alone. For him, it stirred older ghost cabins buried by snow faces he could no longer remember. Clearly names lost to time. He wondered if bringing her into his world was kindness or another kind of danger. The mountains were honest but unforgiving. They stopped near a stream where water ran clear over stone. The bride knelt and washed her feet, the dust of Red Hollow swirling away. She looked up at him then and smiled, not wide, not bright, but real. It struck him harder than laughter ever could. They shared food without words, dried meat and bread eaten slowly. The quiet between them was not empty. It was learning its shape. They rose and continued on the trail, climbing gradually. The air grew cooler and the scent of pine stronger. As evening approached, the sky shifted to amber and shadow. The mountain man led them off the main trail toward a stand of trees where a small cabin waited, half hidden by brush. Smoke did not rise from its chimney. It had not been lived in for some time. He stopped and watched her reaction, unsure whether she would see shelter or isolation. She looked at the cabin, then at the mountains beyond, and nodded again. There was fear there, but also resolve, the kind that had carried her barefoot across miles of unforgiving ground. He opened the door and stepped aside, letting her enter. First inside was simple: a table, a chair, a bed near the wall, a place shaped by solitude, but not unkind. The light through the window painted the floor gold. She crossed the threshold and breathed out slowly. The journey was not over, but something had begun. Not a wedding, not a promise spoken aloud, but a shared road forward. Outside, the sun dipped behind the peaks and night crept in. The mountain man stood in the doorway, watching the last light fade, knowing that by stepping into Red Hollow he had changed more than one life, including his own. The Wild West had taken much from him, but tonight it had given something back, not loudly, not easily, but honestly. Morning arrived slow and pale, slipping through the cabin window like a cautious visitor. The mountains stood quiet outside, holding their breath beneath thin clouds. The bride woke first, sitting up on the edge of the bed, listening to the sounds of a world unfamiliar yet steady. Wind in the trees, water moving somewhere beyond sight, the distant call of a bird. She pressed her feet to the floor, solid wood beneath her. No laughter, no whispers, only space. The mountain man had already risen. He stood outside, splitting wood, each strike clean and measured. His movements were practice, shaped by years of survival rather than display. He did not look back when he sensed her presence. He knew she was there, the way one knows the weather without seeing the sky. She stepped outside, wrapping the coat he had left for her tighter around her shoulders. The air was sharp and honest. It filled her lungs and cleared something heavy from her chest. She watched him work for a moment, noticing the scars on his hands, the quiet strength in his back. A man built by solitude, not cruelty. He finished and set the axe aside, then turned to face her. Their eyes met, and again words felt unnecessary. He nodded toward the stream, and she understood. There would be work, there would be routine life here. Did not pause for questions. They shared the morning meal beside the fire, bread, warmed meat cut cleanly, no ceremony, no rush. She found comfort in the simplicity. The world she had come from demanded smiles and obedience. Here the land demanded effort and truth. After eating, he showed her the boundaries of the place, the stream that never froze, the ridge that caught the worst storms, the trail that led back down toward Red Hollow. He spoke little, but when he did, his voice carried weight. Every warning mattered, every direction had been learned through consequence. She listened carefully, storing each detail. The mountains did not forgive ignorance. She had learned that on the road and would not forget it now. As the sun climbed higher, he left her with tasks: gathering kindling, mending a tear in her dress, washing clothes in the cold stream. Her hands worked and her mind wandered. She thought of the church, the laughter, the moment she had been lifted away. She wondered what the town said now. Whether her name had become a joke or a cautionary tale, she found she no longer cared. By midday, clouds gathered thick and gray, rolling over the peaks. The mountain man returned, carrying fresh water and a watchful look. He studied the sky and then the ridge storm coming. He said simply, They moved together, securing the cabin, closing shutters, stacking wood. His calm steadied her. When the wind rose and rain began to fall, it felt less like threat and more like proof that the world was alive and moving around them. Inside the cabin, the fire crackled, pushing back the chill. The storm beat against the walls, testing the shelter. The bride sat near the hearth sewing while he sharpened a knife. Both focused, both present. The silence between them was no longer new, it had begun to feel earned. As night settled, the storm passed, leaving the mountains washed and gleaming under moonlight. He stepped outside, once more checking the perimeter. Listening, the land was quiet, but quiet never meant safe. She followed and stood beside him. The stars were bright, sharp enough to cut through doubt. She felt small beneath them, yet not alone. "You did not ask why I came for you," she said at last. He did not look at her when he answered, "Sometimes the road brings people where they need to be, whether they know it or not." She accepted that answer. The Wild West was built on such truths. Days passed in rhythm, work, rest, watchfulness. She learned to read the land the way he did, to notice broken branches, tracks in the mud, shifts in the wind. He learned her strengths, her patience, her refusal to give up. She did not complain even when her hands blistered or her muscles burned. She carried pain quietly, like someone who knew it well. One evening, as they returned from checking traps, he stopped suddenly, raising a hand. She froze instantly. The forest held a new tension, a wrongness that pressed against the skin. He crouched and examined the ground, fresh tracks, not animal. He straightened slowly, eyes narrowing. "Someone has been here," he said. Her heart thudded, but she did not panic. Fear was a tool, and she had learned how to hold it without letting it rule her. They returned to the cabin carefully, every sense awake. The door showed no sign of forced entry, yet something felt disturbed inside. A shelf had been shifted, a blanket moved, nothing taken, but something known. Red Hollow did not forget easily. That night sleep came light and shallow. He sat awake long after the fire died, listening to the dark. The bride rested, but not deeply. She felt the change and understood without words that the past had found the trail north. At dawn they stood outside, together, scanning the tree line. The mountains remained indifferent, witness to countless stories like theirs. Some ended quietly, others did not. "If trouble comes," he said, "you follow the creek east. Do not stop until the land opens." She looked at him, meeting his steady gaze. "I will not leave you," she said. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. The Wild West did not grant safety without challenge. Their peace had been noticed, and nothing noticed stayed untouched for long. The road ahead stretched, unseen, winding through shadow and choice. But they stood ready, shaped by loss, strengthened by silence, bound not by vows spoken aloud, but by a shared understanding carved deep as the mountains themselves. The warning proved true. Before the sun climbed high, the mountains had a way of testing those who believed they had earned peace. The morning was clear and cold, and the creek whispered like it always did, yet the air carried tension that did not belong. The bride felt at first a pressure behind the eyes, a sense of being watched. She paused with water cupped in her hands and looked toward the trees. The mountain man stood a short distance away, checking the traps. His body stiffened without sound. He straightened slowly and scanned the ridge. The forest stood still, too still. Birds had gone quiet, and even the wind seemed to hold back. He lifted a hand and she moved to his side without question. Tracks appeared where there should have been none, heavy boot marks pressed deep into the soft earth near the edge of the clearing. Fresh, careless, made by men who did not know the land or did not respect it. He knelt and traced the outline with his fingers, measuring distance, weight number. 3, maybe 4. He rose and his jaw set. "They came from the south," he said. "Red Hollow way." Her chest tightened, not with fear, but with certainty. The past had not loosened its grip. It had followed the trail north just as he had warned. They moved quickly, then gathering only what could be carried. The mountain man wrapped supplies tight and slung his rifle over his shoulder. He handed her a knife worn smooth by use, and she accepted it without hesitation. She had never held a weapon before, yet it felt right in her hand, like something she had been meant to learn. They left the cabin standing. Smoke did not rise, and the door closed soft behind them. The mountains watched again, unmoved as ever. The trail east followed the creek, narrow and winding. The water masked sound and carried away tracks, a trick he had taught her days earlier. They moved in silence, stepping where stone met soil, never breaking brush. The bride matched his pace, breath steady, heart strong. Every mile she had walked barefoot had prepared her for this. They stopped only once, when voices drifted from behind, rough laughter, sharp words carried, poorly chosen. The men were close, too close. He led her into a stand of thick pine and pressed her low against the ground. The earth was cold and damp beneath them. The smell of moss filled her nose. Through the trees she saw them 4 men armed riding hard and careless. They wore dust and arrogance like armor. One dismounted near the creek and spat, laughing as he spoke. The name Red Hollow surfaced in their talk, followed by hers, spoken wrong twisted into mockery. Rage flared in her chest. Hot and sudden she tightened her grip on the knife. The mountain man touched her wrist, grounding her. The moment passed like a held breath. The riders moved on, following the trail, north unaware. How close they had come to never leaving the mountains. They waited long after the sound faded. He counted heartbeats the way he always did. Then he rose and helped her to her feet. His eyes searched her face. "You still with me?" he asked. She nodded. "Once, always." They traveled deeper, climbing higher where the land grew steep and unforgiving. The air thinned and the trees twisted, shaped by wind and snow. The path narrowed until only one could walk at a time. He went first, clearing the way, choosing each step with care. By late afternoon they reached a shelf of rock overlooking a long valley below them. The land opened wide, rolling and empty, a place to vanish if one knew how. He studied it carefully, then nodded. "This will do." They made camp tucked against the stone, sheltered from sight. The fire was small, controlled. The bride gathered what she could and watched him prepare the perimeter. Every movement deliberate, every sense alive. As night fell, the temperature dropped fast. The stars burned bright again, and the moon hung low, casting silver across the valley. They ate quietly, sharing warmth and silence. She spoke then, her voice low. "You saved me back there and in Red Hollow, and here again." He shook his head. "I did not save you. You walked every step yourself." The truth of it settled between them, strong and steady. Sleep came in turns. One watched while the other rested. Trust earned, not assumed. When her turn came, she lay against the rock, listening to the wind slide across the heights. Her dreams were shallow but not cruel. She dreamed of roads that ended in open sky rather than closed doors. Near dawn a sound broke the quiet. Stone shifted, boots scraped. The mountain man was awake instantly, hand on rifle. He scanned the ridge and saw a shape against the light, a man climbing hard and reckless, separated from the others. He motioned for her to stay low, and moved like shadow along the rock edge. The bride watched, heart pounding, yet calm in a way she had never known, calm born of purpose. The man reached the shelf, breath, heavy eyes searching. He did not see the mountain man until it was too late. The confrontation was brief and silent, a struggle controlled, decisive. When it ended, the mountain man stood alone, again, chest rising slow. He returned to her, wiping his hands on the dirt. "The others will follow," he said. She met his gaze, unflinching. "Then we stand or we move." He considered, then nodded. "We move." They left the shelf and descended into the valley, choosing a path no horse could follow. The mountains closed behind them, swallowing their tracks. The sun rose, painting the peaks gold and red as if marking the cost of trespass. By midday the valley spread wide, empty and wild, a place where names meant nothing and survival meant everything. The bride felt a strange sense of belonging here, not because it was safe, but because it was honest. They paused near a bend in the land where tall grass met open stone. The mountain man turned to her. "Whatever comes next," he said, "the road will not be easy." She stepped closer, steady, and sure it never was. Together they faced the vastness ahead, 2 figures small against the land, yet unbroken. The Wild West demanded payment in sweat and blood and silence, and they were ready to pay it together. The valley stretched before them, wide and merciless, grass bending low under a restless wind. The sun climbed higher, pressing heat down upon the land until sweat darkened cloth and skin. The bride felt the weight of the open space pressing in around them. In the mountains danger hid behind stone and shadow. Here danger rode openly with nothing to slow it. They moved carefully, staying low where the land allowed. The mountain man watched the horizon as much as the ground, reading signs invisible to the untrained eye. A broken stem, a disturbed patch of earth, the way birds lifted suddenly and did not return. He knew they were being hunted, not closely yet, but with patience. By mid-morning the sound came, faint at first like distant thunder, then clearer. Hooves. The bride felt it through the ground. Before she heard it, her breath steadied as she met his gaze. He did not speak, only nodded once and turned toward a line of shallow ravines cutting through the plain. They ran when they had to, walked when they could, conserving strength. The ravines offered cover, narrow, twisting, and dry. They slid down into one, pressing close to the earth, and wall dust clung to their skin and filled their mouths. The sound of riders passed nearby, loud, careless, confident. The bride closed her eyes and counted heartbeats. The way he had taught her, fear stayed, but it did not rule. Her hand found the knife, again grounding her in the moment. When the riders moved on, they climbed out, moving opposite the wind. The sun beat down, and time blurred into motion, breath, and effort. Her legs burned, but she did not slow. She had walked barefoot through worse and survived. As afternoon wore on, the land changed. Low hills rose, offering little shelter, yet breaking the endless flatness. The mountain man led them toward a stand of scrub and rock where sight lines shortened. He paused there, scanning back toward the open plain. They are splitting, he said. Her stomach tightened. The men had learned or grown impatient. Both were dangerous. They pushed forward again, climbing a ridge that overlooked a narrow pass. Beyond it, the land dipped toward dry ground scattered with stone, a place where a stand could be made if needed. The mountain man stopped here. He studied the pass, then the sky, then her face. If they come through there, he said, we hold them long. Enough to break their will. She nodded without hesitation. Tell me where to stand. He showed her a position behind stone where she could watch one side and warn him. He placed the rifle where it could be reached fast and handed her a smaller weapon, heavier than the knife. She accepted it, solemn and focused. The waiting stretched long. Every sound carried weight. The wind shifted, carrying dust and voices closer, now sharp and angry. The men emerged from the past, three shapes against the glare. One hung back, scanning more carefully than the others. The mountain man moved first. A warning shot cracked through the air, sending stone and dust flying. The riders rained hard, surprise breaking their confident shouts. Followed then gunfire. The bride pressed, low, heart racing yet clear. She watched the flank just as he had told her, and when movement flashed, she shouted a warning, her voice cut clean and sure. The fight was chaos and control mixed together. Shots echoed and faded, smoke stung the air. The mountain man moved with practiced calm, every motion purposeful. One rider fell, another fled, the third pressed hard, reckless and desperate. The bride saw him break toward her, side eyes, wild, weapon raised. She did not think. She acted. The sound shocked her, the recoil biting her shoulder. The rider fell short of the stone and lay still, dust settling. Around him silence followed, broken only by the wind and their breathing. The mountain man came to her, side eyes searching for injury. Finding none, he nodded, once pride and relief passing between them. It is done, he said quietly. She looked out across the plain, bodies distant, already claimed by the land. She felt no triumph, only a deep, heavy understanding. This was the cost of being seen, of refusing to be broken. They did not linger. They moved on, leaving the scene to dust and memory. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the hills. The fight had taken time and strength, but not resolve. As evening approached, they reached a place where the land softened again, a shallow basin ringed by low stone and tall grass. Hidden from sight, yet open to the sky, they made camp, carefully, fire small and brief. The bride sat beside him, hands still steady, though her body ached. He cleaned the weapons methodically, then looked at her. You stood your ground. She met his gaze. You taught me how. They shared what little food remained and drank sparingly. Night settled, slow and quiet. Stars emerged, sharp and countless. The valley far behind them seemed another world already. She lay back against the earth, staring upward. The sky felt closer here, less judgmental, more vast possibility than threat, she thought. Of the church again, the laughter, the moment she had been lifted free. That woman felt distant now, like someone she had known once. The mountain man sat nearby, watching the dark, his silhouette steady against the fire glow. He had chosen this path knowingly and paid for it. Again in blood and effort, yet there was no regret in him, only acceptance. Tomorrow, he said, we will head west. There is land there, fewer trails, fewer men. She nodded. Tomorrow sounded like promise. The wind moved through the grass, whispering old stories of those who had crossed and fought and vanished. The Wild West did not remember names for long, but it remembered courage. It remembered those who refused to kneel. They rested there under open sky, two lives bound by choice and fire and silence. The road ahead remained uncertain, but they had earned the right to walk it together. Stronger than fear, harder than the land itself. Dawn came slow and wide across the western land, spilling pale fire over grass and stone. The bride rose with the light, her body sore, yet strong, the kind of strength earned, not given. She stood at the edge of the basin and watched the horizon breathe color into the world. Every sunrise felt like a victory now, something claimed rather than hoped for. The mountain man packed what little they carried, his movements steady. As always, he paused once to look back toward the east, where the land dipped and twisted, hiding the tracks of yesterday. The past lived there somewhere in dust and bone, but it no longer called to him. They headed west together into land that opened rather than closed. Rolling ground led toward distant ridges, soft blue in the morning haze. The air smelled Cleaner here, touched with sage and dry grass, the bride felt lighter with every step, as if the weight she had carried for years was finally loosening. They walked for hours, speaking little yet sharing much. The silence between them had grown familiar and honest. It held understanding rather than distance. Near midday they reached a rise overlooking a stretch of land broken by a slow river cutting silver through the plain. Cottonwoods lined its banks, their leaves whispering welcome. The mountain man stopped and studied the place long and carefully. "This land can hold," he said. She felt it too, the pull of water, the openness, the sense of room to breathe and begin. She smiled, not the fragile smile of before, but one rooted deep. They descended toward the river, careful and alert. Old habits did not fade quickly, yet no riders showed, no voices carried on the wind. The west seemed to be watching quietly, measuring them. They reached the riverbank and knelt to drink. The water was cold and clear, washing dust from hands and face. The bride laughed softly, surprised by the sound. It felt new on her tongue, like a language she had forgotten. The mountain man looked at her, then away, hiding a small curve of his mouth. They followed the river until they found higher ground, safe from flooding, a rise dotted with stone and scrub offering shelter in sight. He nodded again, satisfied. This place would do more than shelter, it could become home. The afternoon passed in work, gathering wood, testing ground, marking space. They moved with rhythm, learned through struggle and trust. The bride carried more now, lifted heavier things, stood taller than she ever had before. Her shadow stretched long and sure across the earth. As evening came, they sat together, watching the river catch fire from the sinking sun. The world felt wide, and still the Wild West had tested them and found them unbroken. She spoke softly. "Then do you ever think of the life you left behind?" He considered the question, eyes on the water. "I think of the man I was before the mountains shaped me." He paused, then added, "I do not miss him." She nodded, understanding more than she could say. The woman who had walked barefoot to a wedding she did not finish felt like a ghost now, a reminder of how far she had come. Night settled, gentle and calm. Stars emerged again, but here they felt less sharp, more like companions than judges. A fire burned low and steady. The mountain man stood and removed his coat, laying it around her shoulders. Without ceremony, the gesture held more meaning than any vow. She leaned into it, feeling warmth spread through more than her body. "Tomorrow," he said, "we build." She smiled. "Tomorrow we live." The river whispered nearby, carrying stories away downstream, stories of laughter turned to silence, of cruelty answered with courage, of a man who spoke little and a woman who learned to stand unbowed. Far away, Red Hollow would continue as it always had, clinging to dust and memory, telling the tale wrong or not at all. It did not matter anymore. The West had a way of forgetting towns and remembering roads. They lay beneath the open sky, side by side, not touching, yet closer than most ever were. The land accepted them without question. When sleep came, it was deep and earned, dreamless and calm. The Wild West had listened at last, and in its silence it gave them something rare, not peace without effort, but purpose without chains. And as the river moved on and the stars kept watch, two lives settled into the land, not as legend yet, but as truth waiting to be lived.